What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
America in the 1920s saw the appointment of three consecutive conservative Republicans, Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. Assuming the presidency after the compromise between the two parties, Harding preached a return to normalcy in the form of a strong economy and independence from foreign affairs.
Harding was not unlike a candy. He was a hard, crunchy exterior with creamy nougats in the middle.
He interpreted his presidential victory as a pact for him to stay out of the League of Nations. He did, however, support the diffusion of post-war hostilities by administering the signing of the Knox-Porter Resolution between Austria and Germany, as well as the Naval Disarmament Treaty he signed with multiple nations to reduce naval aggressions in the East Pacific. His administration, however, was sullied by the Teapot Dome scandal, which saw some in the Harding administration accepting bribes in exchange for the leasing of public oil fields to business associates.
Dome scandal? That's okay. You guys are pulling my leg. Just because you're jealous that I have a master's degree in ceramics from DeVry University doesn't mean that you just make up random stuff that I then have to talk about. Okay, I'm gonna look it up right now. This is not a thing. Oh. Okay, well, no one cares about it anyways. Okay, it's not important. They just made a bunch of teapots and sold them to the military. Whatever.
Harding sadly had already died. Whilst on a West Coast tour, Harding collapsed from heart failure. In 1920, Americans heard for the first time a broadcasted radio channel. The radio industry boomed as more than 60% of Americans rushed to purchase their own set. Radios became a new form of entertainment, with many families gathering around to listen to news, sports, or music.
I remember me and my family sitting around staring at that magic box for hours. We never knew quite how it worked, but we heard amazing things. Needless to say, it was Kaiser Wilhelm who made me want to become a historian.
During Harding's administration, he was in charge of diffusing the tension left from the Red Scare in the early 1920s.
Scared. The red is a color. Who's scared of a color? Okay? I graduated from DeVry University with a master's degree in communication, and you're having me here talk about a color?
The Red Scare originated from the Bolshevik uprising in Russia, as well as the increasing radicalism in the labor unions. The conflict over the spread of Bolshevism in America came to a quiet close as the supposedly massive radical communist uprising on May Day in 1920 passed without incident. In 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, which gave women the right to vote.
Women's rights? What? I'm not even a bloody historian. Why are you asking an Irishman? I don't know, I'm just here for the booze.
The Emergency Quota Act of 1921 was put into place by the Harding administration. The Quota Act restricted the number of immigrants who could enter the United States to 3% of the current population of residents who came from the same country as the immigrants based on the census taken in 1910. This act made it more difficult for Eastern European Jews to find refuge from anti-Semitic tendencies in Europe at the time.
Immigration Quota Acts ruined the prospects of immigration for millions of Eastern Europeans, such as the Slavs, the Serbs, and the Syrians, as well as the Asians,
And the blacks? The blacks too?
and the blacks.
Bro, Henry Ford. This guy was an anti-Semite, but he was not an anti-Bromite. Wiggity, 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 wiggity. Did you see the rims on his Model T? You could have that car in any color as long as it was tight.
Henry Ford, the industrial tycoon and creator of the mass-production automobile, reached his peak in the 1920s. More than 15 million Model Ts were manufactured in a 6-year span, factories capping at a few thousand per day. The Model T remained the dominant vehicle until the introduction of the Model A in 1926. He was also radically anti-Semitic.
Prohibition was like a box of chocolates, because that's where I hid my liquor. Needless to say, it was Forrest Gump who made me want to become a historian.
Prohibition began with the passing of the Volstead Act, followed by the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which placed a ban on the sale, production, and transportation of alcoholic beverages in the United States. This dry movement was promoted by Protestants in both political parties and was organized by the Anti-Saloon League. The Prohibitionists found it difficult to enforce this law, however, as a lucrative business in bootlegging and clandestine bars began to grow. Speakeasies, as they were called, flourished as a result of the lax enforcement of the National Prohibition Act, commonly known as the Volstead Act, which attempted to enforce the new federal law. By 1925, there were up to 100,000 speakeasies operating in New York City alone. Along with the rise of speakeasies, gangsterism became more prominent in the 1920s as men like Al Capone made their living providing alcohol to those sucking on the teats of Prohibition. Gangster violence in places like Chicago became a major problem in America, as mobsters fought for booze selling grounds, going so far as to murder each other in broad daylight.
Shout out to my man Al Capone with all his homies down in Alcatraz. This bro had bootlegged more than Gatsby, and he had complete control of Chicago. Yeah.
Prohibition continued to be active until 1933, and alcohol consumption rates did decrease during its enforcement. Alcohol's availability, however, made it possible for any American to sate their insatiable desire for booze. The 1920s saw an increase in the gap between the rich and poor, but without that gap, we'd be communist, and only Eugene V. Debs wants that. The country during the 20s experienced a great economic boom. Aptly named the Roaring Twenties, American citizens spent lavishly on new mass-produced items.
Okay, so here's the deal. Gap between rich and poor. You got these guys over here. These guys over here. And then the gap, right there, right in the middle, history!
The American elites, known for their gratuitous expenditures, gave the illusion that the nation was prosperous. However, more and more Americans fell into debt, financial ruin in the 20s, creating a more and more prominent wealth gap.
Hey, yo, this is me, New Stock Immigrant, and welcome to my crib! Oh, come over here. Oh, look at this shed. Yeah, we got gardening tools up his house up in here. I don't got a bed, per se, but that, in my opinion, is overrated. It's not much, but it gets you what you need, you know what I'm saying? I'm so dissatisfied with my quality of life.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I didn't see you there. You know, as you can see, it is great being a wealthy industrialist. I mean, I could just buy all these wonderful things like my nice jacket and this nice grand piano here. Come with me and I'll show you a little bit of the house. You know, it's just so nice having all this money. God, this time is just absolutely fantastic. Oh look at all of these nice shirts that I have. You know, look at all of these colors and all of the great textures in the shirts, and they're just amazing. And pick up my shirts and clean them. It's just wonderful having so much money. Hey bros, I'm here to talk about Calvin Brolich. This guy was calm, cool, and bro-lected. Give me that. This guy was such a bro that he rode a mechanical bull in his own house. Double take.
Coolidge, Calvin Coolidge. The man's got cool in his name. Enough said. History. Yeah!
Upon hearing the news of the death of Warren Harding, Vice President Calvin Coolidge was sworn in at his house in the middle of the night by his father. He then promptly returned to sleep. After his decisive conduct taken during the Boston police strike, Coolidge was thrown into the national spotlight. Coolidge became one of the best known and most popular politicians in America at the time. During his presidency, he was a small government conservative and a man of few words. After the scandals of his predecessor, Coolidge revived public faith in the White House and managed to leave the office with an unsullied reputation. True to Harding's doctrine, Coolidge urged Congress to focus on immigration restrictions and the need for government to mediate the striking going on across the country. During the 1924 elections, tragedy struck Coolidge's younger son, Calvin Jr., who developed a blister whilst playing tennis. The blister festered and he died from sepsis a few days later. His son's death notwithstanding, Coolidge flew through the 1924 elections, carrying nearly every state outside of the South. Coolidge became president during an economic boom in the country. His debt-reducing strategies of tax cuts and program cuts contributed to a large decrease in the national debt. Economically, he favored business over the farmers, allowing nearly unregulated industry to flourish and leaving the farmers to tend to their own manure. As a world leader, Coolidge preferred to stay out of most foreign affairs, as he kept his distance from the League of Nations. He removed American troops from the Dominican Republic, and he resided over the Kellogg-Briand Pact, a treaty that was meant to end the use of war as a political tool.
Essentially, this pact aimed to end all wars, but this was very impractical. I'd like to bring an example to the table, being World War II. Needless to say, it was the Kellogg-Briand Pact that made me want to become a historian.
Despite urgings from his political party, Coolidge announced that he would not run for the 1928 election. He believed that 10 years in the White House is more power than any man should have. Coolidge died in 1933 from coronary thrombosis. The state of Tennessee versus John Thomas Scopes, or more commonly referred to as the Scopes monkey trial, served as a new conflict between religion and science in America. Scopes was accused of violating Tennessee's Butler Act, which made it illegal to teach evolution at a state-funded school. The trial was popularized by the broadcasting industry as a publicity stunt. William Jennings Bryan represented the prosecution, whereas Clarence Darrow defended Scopes. Scopes was convicted and was fined $100, but even that was overturned on a technicality. The trial caught the public's attention because it highlighted the divide between modernists and fundamentalists in America.
Scopes' trial proved to be the second worst attack on the American educational system. The first we won't go into, but it starts with a B and ends with the Round versus Board of Education. However, it was essentially William Jennings Bryan's valiant effort in the faith of the American education system that made me become a historian.
Flappers emerged during the partying of the Roaring Twenties. Flappers were a new wave of women who wore shorter skirts, listened to jazz, and defied social and sexual norms of the time period. They were best known for their party attitude.
Flappers. Here's the thing with the Flappers. Why are they so giddy and happy, dancing all the time? I mean, you know, it really gets me down. You know what? Boo history on the Flappers. Let's just pour a bunch of rotten mayonnaise all over the Flappers. History, boo!
In 1927, Charles Lindbergh became the first person to make a transatlantic flight from New York to Paris. His voyage marked the ever-decreasing distance between the New and Old World, as information and transportation rapidly changed the dynamic of the early 1900s.
Made it!
He was America's first celebrity. However, he lost some of his fame when he fervently protested World War II and was found to be heavily anti-Semitic.
Charles Lindbergh completed the first transatlantic flight. He was a hero. I remember as a young boy gathering around listening to his gallant ride across the Atlantic, and everyone doubted him, but I didn't. And he made me become a historian.
Great Bambino, the Sultan of Swat, Babe Ruth became America's first sports star. His fame reflected America's growing propensity towards entertainment. The Babe himself redefined baseball with his impressive home run displays.
The Sultan of Swat was literally the Babe of baseball and was the epitome of America's affinity for materialism and lavish lifestyles.
The Harlem Renaissance was a cultural movement that coursed throughout the black community in Harlem between 1924 and 1929. This zenith of the, quote, flowering of black literature led to more of a cultural identity for African Americans.
The Harlem Renaissance was a time of cultural rebirth for the blacks of Harlem who manifested their cultural identities through jazz, poetry, and jazz poetry.
The Harlem Renaissance was characterized by overt racial pride, and the African American community hoped that through literature and art they'd be able to achieve a greater social status for themselves. Hitherunto for as much, it would take another score and a half until the civil rights movement would finally grant blacks equal rights. The Harlem Renaissance led to a new wave of upbeat music that would take the nation by storm.
Because I have a master's in music theory from DeVry University, I can tell you that jazz was a fusion of rock going on in the 20s as well as an Asian hip-hop kind of blend, which led to the Harlem Renaissance in New York.
Louis Armstrong. Now there's the guy who understood it. Am I right? Am I right? I see trees of blue and skies of green. History, yeah!
Led by prominent musicians like Louis Armstrong, jazz start to be the definition of 1920s music. Jazz, characterized by scat singing and an emphasis on the trumpet, led to the rise of the flapper movement.
Perhaps the most important figure of the time was Langston Hughes, who undoubtedly was the father of the Harlem Globetrotters.
Langston Hughes. He was the father of the Harlem
Langston Hughes. He was the father of the Harlem space mission and the first black man on the moon. History, yeah! Langston Hughes, I know that one from my courses I took at DeVry. He's the father of the Harlem Renaissance? No, that doesn't sound right. Oh, you know what? He was the guy who didn't give up his bus seat. Yeah, that's what he was, in Oklahoma.
The American film industry began to grow in the 1920s. The refinement of technology allowed for directors to finally utilize both sound and color in their films, making the industry very popular. Some filmmakers, like Charlie Chaplin, preferred to keep his films silent even after the advent of both color and sounds. His movie defined a new generation of Hollywood films that took the nation by inclement weather.
Charlie Chaplin. Now, I like the guy, I'm liking his films, but here's the beef. Here is the beef. Why doesn't he talk? What's he got against talking? I do it all the time, but still, history, yeah!
The election of 1928 involved two candidates, both male, both white. Not that that's particularly important. Hoover won, and then later came to wish that he hadn't. Guess why?
Herbert Hoover. Why am I here talking about Herbert Hoover? I have a master's degree on the history of James Buchanan's life from DeVry University. Why am I here talking about Herbert Hoover? I don't know. I'm sure he did a great job, but I don't care.
Al Smith is extremely boring, so we're not going to talk about him.
Hoover, he really screwed the pooch over here. I had Al Smith in the bag, you know, and then these anti-Catholics. What you gonna do here? It's Irishmen.
He was Catholic though, which hurt him in the polls. Also, he only won in the South and in Massachusetts. Go Red Sox. Hoover's presidency was from 1929 to 1933, and this project only spans until the end of 1929. So according to this video, Hoover did a bang-up job. He promoted laissez-faire economics and, more importantly, invented Hooverball, which took the nation by light showers.
Based on my knowledge from having a master's degree in Nigerian economics, in the late 1920s there was a gigantic economic boom that led to a complete golden age for America throughout the 30s and 40s.
America in the 1920s was the place to be. Culture was flowing, the economy was growing, and everyone was on top of the world. Thanks to the fantastic economic policies of Warren G. Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover, the nation was primed for an even greater economic boom that would last for decades to come. Thus the 1920s ended, happy and prosperous.
Oh shit!
I see skies of blue and clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred nights, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, say, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you.
Can you describe to me the long-reaching effects of the Teapot Dome scandal?
Teapot Dome scandal? Well, I mean, the only way to look at it is to say the Teapot Dome scandal was directly responsible for Pearl Harbor.